Hello everyone and welcome to the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund Summer 2022 briefing event. My name is Jenny McDonald from Innovate UK's KTN and I'm hosting today's webinar on behalf of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, supported by my colleagues Stefan Eldred and Olivia Brown. Now, before we get started on today's presentations, I just want to take you through some housekeeping. If you could move to the next slide, please. I'm having a little technical difficulty. That's lovely. So you are in YouTube and we're running the event on Zoom, so you won't be able to directly speak and put questions to BEIS by talking, but you can type your questions that you might have about any of the presentations you're going to see today in the chat box on YouTube. So my colleague Stefan is with you on YouTube and he will copy those questions across to us. So as you watch the presentations this morning, if you think of a question, type it into the chat box about any of the three competitions that you're going to hear about, or more generally about the programme, that's fine. And Steph will pass them over and I will put that question to BEIS for you. Obviously, this is a virtual event, so we have over 460 people registered for today's event. So please do introduce yourself on YouTube as well. Say your name and your organisation and maybe a little bit about your interest in the IETF. You may then find a partner that you can work with or potentially a new customer. The event is being recorded and you will have a link to the recording and also a link to the presentations that you're going to see this morning. So you'll be able to watch it again or share with colleagues who maybe haven't been able to make it today. And finally, you have the opportunity to have a short one-to-one discussion in confidence with BEIS or myself after today's event at 1:30. So they're going to be taking place on our IETF networking platform, Meeting Mojo. So if you're not already registered on that platform and you'd like to have a 10-minute chat with BEIS to talk about your project idea or anything else relating to the IETF, then you can register at the link I've provided there and book a 10-minute slot with them. So do take advantage of that. Next slide. So today's agenda, it's nice, short and sweet today. We've got, first of all, a presentation from Lily Tozer. She's going to take you through an overview of the programme and the scope and eligibility of the three competitions. We will then have a presentation from Marcus Rosewell, who will take you through the application process itself, so using BEIS's new portal and the application form. And then that will be your opportunity to have your questions answered at the Q&A. So as I say, don't wait for 10:45. As soon as a question occurs to you, type it into the chat box on YouTube. And then when we get to the Q&A session, I will put those questions to BEIS for you. Following the Q&A, we have 9 organisations who are going to do 2-minute pitches for you about the skills and services that they have to offer that might be useful to you when bidding into the IETF. And then we'll wrap up today's event with a short presentation from myself about some of the support services that are available to help you when you're bidding for the IETF competitions. So hopefully all of that will be very useful and informative and help you to apply to the fund. So now let's get started with the presentations. And first up, I'd like to introduce you to Lily Tozer, who's head of IETF capacity building, to talk about the scope and eligibility of the competitions. Over to you, Lily.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. As Jenny said, I head up the IETF capacity building team. That essentially means that if you've got any questions about the fund, it'll be myself and my team that are there at the other end of an email address helping you. And we can also set up meetings and other things as well if you've got questions about the fund that we haven't answered in the webinar this morning. I'm going to talk about the scope of the IETF, all of the eligibility rules that you need to know, and crucially why we've been set up in the first place. As I go through, I really strongly encourage you as well to make sure that if you're interested in applying in the fund, you also look at our guidance. That'll go into much more detail than I can today about all of the different rules for the fund that you'll need to know when you're applying. So why are we here? Well, Crucially, we know that the UK has a legally binding target to meet net zero emissions by 2050, and industry has a really big role to play in meeting that goal. So 16% of emissions currently produced in the UK come from the industrial sectors. And we know that it's going to be a challenge to reduce those emissions in a way that helps UK industry to remain competitive and thriving over the coming years. So we've produced various roadmaps. You'll be able to refer back to the net zero strategy that was published towards the end of last year, as well as the industrial decarbonisation strategy, which was published by BEIS a little bit earlier in the year. Both of those set out this chart, which shows that over the next 5 to 10 years, we expect a large part of that decarbonisation to come from the adoption of technologies that will help you to become more resource and energy efficient. And then looking further ahead, we'll critically be relying on technologies like carbon capture and switching to lower carbon fuels to achieve those emission savings. And so the IETF has been set up to help you to do that. The first objective we have is to help you to become more energy efficient and to reduce your emissions, and helping you to reduce your energy bills whilst you're doing that. All the more important at the moment in a time of rising fuel bills. The second objective is that we want to smooth that pathway to introducing some of those more novel technologies. So you want to bring down the risks and costs of decarbonisation technologies by demonstrating them at scale and helping first movers through this competition. We're targeted at industrial processes, so that's all of the equipment that you actually use to produce and manufacture. And we're targeted at processes because we know that that's quite often the hardest part of your organisation to deliver emissions and energy savings in, perhaps because you require high temperatures or perhaps you've got very bespoke equipment. And then finally, we're open to businesses all across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So you've got a really broad scope, and I'll talk about that scope in a bit more detail. We've already had 4 competition windows, so we've allocated a large share of our £289 million budget. We do have some money left though, which is the good news, and we'll be allocating that in 2 competition rounds this year. So the first is currently open, that's the Phase 2 Summer 2022 competition, where we have a budget of around £70 million. You can get your applications in now, and we'll close the competition window for new applications in September. But shortly afterwards, we'll be opening up a further competition. That's the Autumn 2022 window that will have the same scope and rules as this one, and it will run between October and January next year. I really strongly encourage you to get your applications in as early as possible, however, and that's because the IETF is a competitive fund, so you stand a much better chance of receiving funding if there's less demand overall, and we do expect a bit of an uptick in applications in that final application window. Each application window has 3 distinct competition strands. That's an energy efficiency deployment strand, a deep decarbonisation strand, and a studies strand. I'll talk about each in a little bit more detail later, but the key thing to note is that they all have slightly different competition rules in terms of the technologies that are eligible and in terms of the funding that you can receive. If you're interested in applying to the fund, these are the key organisations that you'll need to know. So the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, where myself, Marcus and Bess come from. We're there to answer all of your questions, to deliver and manage the fund. So if you're successful in the IETF, it will be BEIS that's working with you to sign grant funding agreements and then to monitor and manage your grant on an ongoing basis. That means that also all of the relevant information about the competition will be up on our gov.uk pages. KTN, so that's Jenny and team, are there as well to support you in your application and have loads of really helpful resources online that you can access, such as the virtual technology marketplace, which Jenny will talk about in a bit more detail later. They'll also be running some further events throughout the year as well. And then finally, I mentioned that the IETF covers sites in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. If you have a site or you're registered in Scotland, then you can apply through the Scottish IETF. That's a sister scheme to the IETF. It has £34 million in its budget, and many of the rules that I'll talk through today will be quite similar. So if that competition is more relevant for you, please do go and look at the Scottish Government web pages to find out a little bit more. In terms of who's eligible to apply, I mentioned that we're targeted at industrial processes, and we use standard industrial classification codes to specify which categories of activity fall within our industrial description. So that covers mining and quarrying, manufacturing, recovery and recycling of materials, as well as data centres, recognising that's an incredibly energy intensive sector. And all of the SIP codes related to those activities are included in this table here. If you're not familiar with SIP codes, that's something that you can look up online. We've got more information in our guidance, and you'll see against each number a more detailed description about what kind of activity falls within that category. Generally, you'll be able to go to your company's house webpage and find your page and see what SIP code you're registered under. In some cases, you might find that actually that SIP code doesn't reflect the kind of activity that you're carrying out at your site. For example, you might have a data center operation, but your parent company carries out a much wider span of activities and it's registered as a telecoms provider. If that's the case, that's not a problem at all. What we'll do in your application is ask you to explain and describe what kind of activity you're carrying out at your site and to assign a standard industrial classification code that best matches to that activity. If you've got any doubts about whether you're eligible, please also feel free to come and talk to us and we can help you. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the site must be an existing operational site. So the IETF isn't here to support the setup of new sites. So the lead applicant needs to be carrying out those different categories of industrial activity, but we also do strongly encourage collaboration. So perhaps you have a proposal where you need the expertise of different organisations to make it a success. That's not a problem at all. You're very welcome to collaborate with others who can be working either with you as a subcontractor, in which case they don't need to be an official project partner, or they can be working with you and directly claiming costs from BEIS as part of your grant, in which case there are a few different rules to be aware of. So first of all, they can fall into any of these categories of organisation, whether that be business, research organisation, charity or public sector organisation. They must be registered in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the work that they're doing must be directly relevant to the grant. The maximum share of costs that research organisations can claim is 30%, and that's really because the IETF again is targeted at industrial sites who should be the main end beneficiary of this work. We're not a research and development fund, and we're really hoping that most of our funding is directed at the activity that's happening at the industrial site itself. We will have our direct relationship as BEIS with the lead applicant. So that means it will be the lead applicant that's signed in the grant funding agreement. But we want to make sure that there's also an understanding of the accountability and responsibilities across all project partners. So we'll be asking you to sign a collaboration agreement as well if you're successful in your application. One of the things to be aware of as well is that the size and the location of your business could impact on the amount of funding that you can receive through the competition. So typically smaller businesses can receive a higher share of their eligible costs in grant funding. To determine what category or what size of business you fall into, this table will help. Again, there's more details in the guidance around this. So you'll need to make sure that your staff headcount falls below the thresholds in this table, and then that either your turnover or your balance sheet total also falls below those thresholds in each individual band. There's a list of different areas in our guidance that will direct you to whether you fall within a tier 1 or tier 2 area. Those areas can receive a greater share of funding as well. So now I'm going to move into talking a bit more about the specific rules for each strand of the competition. So starting off with studies, essentially a study is a report that you produce in order to understand more about the feasibility of carrying out a technology or deploying a technology at your site, or the costs and risks and sort of wider practical factors associated with that work. That means that all of the costs associated with that study would generally be things like staff time or contractor time, and the final outcome of the study should be a report. You can also claim for costs associated with doing tests or equipment that you might need temporarily in order to derive different results to inform the outcomes of your study. What studies can't be used for is to invest in equipment that you'll be installing at your site in the long term, or to invest in, for example, setting up a prototype or a pilot program to prove a technology. As I mentioned, the IETF isn't about R&D, it's about looking at technologies that are already relatively mature and then seeing if they're feasible and viable at your site. So if you're relatively early on in that journey, so you've identified what technology you'd like to investigate at your site, but you're not sure if it's technically feasible to integrate that within your process, then you can apply for a feasibility study. The cost of the study must be at least £30,000 in order to qualify for funding from the IETF. And against that cost, you can receive between 50 and 70% of the funding as grant, depending on the size of your business. And you can get up to £7 million in grant funding from us. A single study can investigate how to deploy a technology across multiple sites, up to a maximum of 5. So that can be a really useful thing. Perhaps if you own multiple sites and you believe that the same kind of technological solution would apply across all of them, you can do a single study to investigate all of those. If you're a little bit further along, so you've identified already that a specific technology solution would be technically feasible, and now you want to do the further work to help you make a final investment decision in whether to deploy that technology, then you can apply for an engineering study. The minimum cost of that study must be £50,000, against which you can receive between 25 and 45% of the costs in grant funding. And that can go all the way up to £40 million in grant. So you can do some really substantial work as part of this study competition. Again, you must be looking at a single defined technology solution, but you can look at how that solution would be deployed across multiple sites. The bullets here include some of the expectations we'd have around what the scope of that study should include, and you'd need to demonstrate that you're meeting that scope in your application. The deployment competition, again, there are some common factors across energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation. The key thing is that we're looking to support you in deploying a technology, which means that the costs that you can claim from us are the costs associated with installing that technology. For example, any of the equipment that you might need, the materials that you might need, the technology solution itself, and any of the costs associated with labour and so on. What we can't support you in is the costs of any ongoing operational costs from installing that new technology. This is essentially a one-off grant against the upfront costs of that technology solution. And you must be able to demonstrate to us that the costs that you're claiming are both additional, which means that you wouldn't have incurred those costs without this investment. So, for example, we can't cover the costs of maintenance. Also that they are directly related to achieving an energy or an emission saving. So I'll give you a brief example of that. If, for example, you were installing a heat exchanger to recover heat and upgrade it to a temperature that you can use in your site, in your industrial process, then you could say that that is purely being installed in order to achieve an energy saving, in which case the full costs of that piece of equipment would be eligible for grant funding. If, however, you were looking to replace an existing piece of equipment, for example, a boiler, then what you typically need to do would be look at what the cost of replacing that boiler with a like-for-like replacement would be versus the cost of replacing that boiler with a much more efficient version. It's the difference between those two costs that you can claim as eligible through the competition. If you have any concerns or doubts about that, again, please do get in touch with us. If you're applying to the energy efficiency strand of the competition, then against those eligible costs, you can receive between 30 and 50% in grant funding. That is a maximum that you can receive, and we do strongly encourage you to minimise your grant ask just to the amount that you need in order to make the project viable for your company. That will be tested at assessment stage, and it will also be something that we work with you on at due diligence stage. If we feel that you're asking for more grant funding than you need, then it's possible that that grant will come down. The minimum grant that we can offer is £100,000. So that means you need to make sure that your costs are above that and that you won't, that you'll be claiming a sufficient amount of grant to overcome that minimum threshold. The maximum that we can offer is £14 million. And once we've given you that funding, we expect you to be up and running with that new piece of equipment after the project's completed. In the deep decarbonisation strand, we recognise that these can be very costly projects and they often don't have paybacks. So we're slightly more generous in the amount of grant funding that we can offer you, which is between 50 and 70% against your eligible costs. Again, the minimum amount of grant funding is £100,000, but the maximum is £30 million. So some really substantial projects can be done through this strand of the competition. Again, at the end of the project, you need to show that you'll be up and running with that piece of technology. And then throughout each strand of the competition, we do allow you to aggregate projects. This can be a beneficial thing, firstly, in terms of the amount of time it takes to fill in the application. So, for example, if you have multiple different studies that you'd like to deploy, and they all have the same lead applicant, so they're all being done by the same company, then you can put those studies into the same application form. That means that you just have a little bit less form filling to do, but each different study would be judged separately. So it might be that if you have some stronger proposals, they'd go through and receive funding. If you have some weaker proposals, they wouldn't, but you wouldn't be advantaged or disadvantaged by aggregating them together. A benefit in the deployment strand of the competition is that by aggregating different proposals together, you can help to overcome that minimum grant funding threshold. So, for example, if you've got two smaller proposals, each of which would be below the £100,000 minimum grant threshold, then by aggregating them together, you can overcome that minimum threshold. There are some rules on when you are allowed to aggregate and when you're not. These are all listed on this slide here, and there's more details in our guidance as well. Now I'm just going to briefly go through the technological scope. So this is all of the eligibility rules related to what technology solutions you can apply for funding through the fund for. And this will be split between energy efficiency projects and deep decarbonisation projects. For both of them, there are slightly different rules. So for deep decarbonisation, we recognise that some of these technologies are less advanced and perhaps more at an early stage of development. So when you're deploying for the when you're applying for the fund, we expect you to be able to demonstrate that the technology solution that you're looking to deploy has achieved at least technology readiness level 7, which means that there's an existing prototype for that technology. If you're applying for the energy efficiency strand of the competition, then you need to show that technology is at least at technology readiness level 8. So that means that it's been tested in and qualified through test and demonstration. As I say, this is mostly looking to support more mature technologies. So if you've not yet advanced your technology solution to the point at which it has been proven or used at any stage in an operational environment, then it's likely that this competition isn't for you. There are other funds offered by BEIS that might be a better fit, for example, offered through the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio, and you can find all the details about that on gov.uk. In the energy efficiency strand of the competition, the key thing that you'll need to be able to demonstrate is that the technology solution that you've identified will achieve energy savings on your site within your industrial process, and that these can be measured by a saving in megawatt hours pre and post you deploying that technology. We're largely technology neutral, so the list here isn't comprehensive, but includes some of the different examples of solutions that have been applied for in the past and might give you ideas about what to apply for in future. So that could include process optimization measures, for example, installing control systems that will help you to better manage your energy on site. It can include equipment upgrades. So I mentioned before, upgrading boilers, dryers, ovens, kilns, all of which would be in scope for funding, providing you do make sure that you've properly identified the eligible costs for those. It can include heat and energy recovery systems, and also resource efficiency measures where you can show that by reducing wastage or optimizing the use of raw materials on your site, you've been able to save energy. In the deep decarbonisation strand of the competition, this is all about being able to show that you are directly reducing the emissions that are produced through your processes. So this is really looking at scope 1 emissions rather than sort of savings that you can generate by reducing the amount of energy that you're using. So here we'd be looking for you to be able to show that you're perhaps switching from a fossil fuel to a lower carbon fuel, and therefore you're reducing your combustion emissions that are produced on your site. So electrification projects would be in scope for funding, retrofits of industrial equipment to use hydrogen or hydrogen blends. In certain instances, we can also support installation of equipment to use biomass and biogas and waste fuels, but there are some quite specific technology criteria that you should be aware of when installing those, and please do look at our guidance. The other technology solution that we'd expect to fall into this strand would be carbon capture, and that can be carbon capture either for utilisation or for onward storage. When we talk about different fuel switching technologies, this table gives an example of the types of fuel switches that we would expect to be eligible. The key rule to be aware of is that your final fuel, so the fuel that you're switching to, must not be more carbon intensive than the gas grid, and you must be able to show that it's less carbon intensive than the fuel that you originally started with. So, for example, switching away from diesel to electricity would be a great example of a fuel switch that would be eligible under our competition. And then lastly, just to quickly touch on some of the different technologies that are out of scope. So I mentioned that if you're setting up a new site, that won't be in scope for funding from the competition, and that's because we're looking to reduce the emissions and the energy that are produced by existing industrial processes. And if you're setting up a new site, we'd hope that you're using the most efficient, most low carbon technology that's available to you. We also can't support the costs associated with expanding capacity at your site. So if you've got any questions about that and how it fits with your project, please do come and talk to us. Repair and maintenance aren't in scope, as I mentioned before, nor would be any kind of work associated with improving the infrastructure of your building. So that could include technology solutions like LED lighting, space heating and cooling. Because they're not directly related to the industrial process, that's out of scope for this fund. Production of fuels isn't in scope, and nor is the production of electricity. So things like solar panels and wind turbines can't receive funding through us, but there are other schemes out there that can help you with those costs. And then finally, just to mention that CHP is only supported with fuel switching. There's much more detail about that in our guidance. So I'm going to pass across now to Marcus, who's going to tell you a little bit about the practicalities of the application process itself.
Thanks, Lily, and good morning, everybody. My name is Marcus Rosewell, and I'm a Senior Delivery Advisor within the IETF team. And for the next part of this morning, I'm going to be taking you through the application process for the IETF Phase 2 Summer 2022 window. So to start with, here are some of the dates, some of the high-level dates for the Phase 2 summer window. I just want to point out a couple of the key ones to you. So the second one there, please note that all applications must be submitted by 3 p.m. on the 9th of September. And then also the final one on this timeline is that please also know that all projects must be complete by the 31st of March 2025. So moving on to how to apply. The first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to fill out the online application form, which can be found at the link shown at the top of this slide. If you're the lead applicant, you will need to set up the account, create the application, and ultimately submit it. But you can invite others to collaborate on your application. If you already have an account from the autumn or spring windows of Phase 2, you'll be able to use your current login details. If you have an account from Phase 1, I'm afraid you won't be able to do this, and you'll have to set up a new account for Phase 2. If you have any technical issues, please do get in touch with us. Now for some top tips to help you fill in the application form. Please ensure you save your work as you go along, and always before navigating away from a particular page, as your work will not be automatically saved. Please use relevant titles when naming projects or proposals, and make sure to be clear and answer the questions in full, trying not to leave any blanks. Ensure your answers, especially if they include numbers, are accurate and consistent with other responses in your application. Please note that where numbers in your project benefit calculator or finance form differ from those in the application form, we will use the application form as the correct number. Be specific, do not talk about wider site projects or plans unless specifically asked in the question. Also provide clear, relevant supporting evidence where required or offered as an option. If you're unable to provide mandatory uploads, please get in touch with us to discuss possible mitigations. Where highly specific industry or engineering terms are used, please explain these so that they can be understood by a non-technical audience. There's also a video for which the link you can see here at the bottom of the slide, which will provide you with more information. I'd now like to move on to the assessment process for the IETF. Firstly, it's a competitive process, so projects will be ranked against each other based on their scores. However, the 3 competition strands, so studies, energy efficiency deployment, and deep decarbonisation deployment, are not assessed together. Each strand is ranked individually. Recommendations for ministers are made by the BEIS grant award panel following the assessment stage. Key criteria across all 3 strands are value for money and additionality, i.e., would this project have gone ahead without government support? Please note some questions have changed in this window in all of the strands, so please read the questions carefully, especially if you are reapplying. Starting off with the studies competition strand, as you can see on the slide now, there are 6 criteria with different weightings as shown in that table. Projects will need to pass minimum thresholds to receive funding. All projects must submit a project plan and risk register in addition to the finance form, which I'll come on to in more detail later. You must also upload evidence to support your answers in the study cost / value for money section, and are strongly encouraged to upload supporting information in other sections where the option is offered. Examples are provided in more detail in the applicant guidance document. Moving on to energy efficiency and DD deployment assessment. Just to repeat, the EE and DD projects won't be assessed against each other, but there are similarities in the assessment process, so I'll cover them together here. Applications will be assessed and scored against 3 criteria. Firstly, the economic assessment, which looks at the costs, benefits, risks of the benefits not being realised, and the need for government support. As part of this, you'll need to fill out a project benefit calculator, which I will cover in more detail in a few slides' time. There's also a transformational assessment, which looks at the compatibility with the government's net zero ambitions. This is where the EE and DD strands differ slightly, as the DD includes an assessment on novelty under the transformational criterion. The final criterion is deliverability, which assesses your plans for delivery, how you will manage risks, your project team, and how you have justified and minimized your project costs. All projects must submit a project plan and risk register in addition to the finance form. You must also upload evidence to support your answers in the economic assessment and the project cost sections, and are strongly encouraged to upload supporting information in the other sections where the option is offered. Examples of these are provided in the applicant guidance, as with the studies. Projects will then be ranked before being considered by the BEIS grant award panel. Energy efficiency projects will be ranked according to their score for the economic assessment, and deep decarbonisation projects will be ranked according to their score for the transformational assessment. So now a little more information on the finance form, and this is applicable to all proposals. As part of your application, you will need to download, complete, and upload a finance form for your project. This covers you and your partner's costs, if applicable, which of these costs are eligible to receive grant funding, and how much funding you are actually requesting. We also ask about other sources of funding. We expect you to apply for the minimum funding necessary for the project to go ahead. More guidance is provided in the form itself, but some points to note. You must ensure all details are correct and in line with the relevant subsidy control rules and regulations. Please note that all DD projects will need to state whether they or any of their project partners are affected by the Northern Ireland Protocol using the relevant drop-down menus on the form. Aid intensity levels of projects or partners covered by the Northern Ireland Protocol differ. The cost figures that you enter should be net of VAT. If for any reason it is possible to recover the VAT on certain costs, for example, if a project partner is not VAT registered, then you will need to explain this in the evidence that you submit. Please provide an estimate, that is as accurate as possible and justify your cost estimates with evidence. Quotes, letters of intent, and indicative costing may be appropriate evidence, and this information will be reviewed by the IETF assessors. If you're applying for multiple proposals, for example, in an aggregated application, you must complete separate tabs within the same finance form for each individual project. As part of your application for deployment projects only, you'll need to download, complete, and upload a project benefits calculator for your project. You're asked to provide information on annual energy consumption, production levels, and greenhouse gas emissions, both before and after completion of the project. You will also need to outline the calculations, assumptions, and sources underpinning your inputs to this calculator. As part of the economic assessment, you'll need to upload supporting evidence. If you're applying for multiple projects, for example, in an aggregated application, you must complete and upload a separate calculator for each individual project. Moving on to submitting your application. So as mentioned earlier, you need to submit your application by 3 p.m. on the 9th of September. Please ensure you have submitted all documents and evidence required, and where possible, any other supporting information or evidence where the opportunity is offered. This will help assessors ensure they have as clear a picture as possible of your project. As just a reminder on the slide here of the things that need to be included in each application. So finance form, a project benefits calculator, uploading evidence to support responses to the economic assessment, that's the deployment only, uploaded evidence to support responses to the study costs and value for money questions in studies, and or the project cost questions in the deliverability section in deployment. You must also have a completed Gantt chart, a completed risk register, and any other additional supporting information where possible and as appropriate. Once you have submitted your application, we will carry out eligibility checks and then pass eligible projects onto our assessors for the assessment stage. There's 3 steps here, which I mentioned earlier as part of the assessment and award process, so I won't cover these in detail again. Successful projects will be required to pass all due diligence checks and accept the terms and conditions of BEIS' grant funding agreement before a final award can be made. Please factor this in when thinking about the proposed start date of your project. If you are unable to apply in this window, we are currently planning a further window this autumn. This is likely to follow a similar format to the summer 2022 window, so please look out for further details as they are published. But we do strongly encourage that you apply to this window if you can, as there is a limited pot and timings for project completions are tight. A reminder again that all projects need to be complete by March 2025. If you have any questions on any of this, please contact us at ietf@beis.gov.uk. Thank you very much for listening. And I'd now like to hand back to Jenny for a Q&A.
Thank you very much, Marcus, and thank you, Lily, as well, for your presentation. So we've had quite a lot of questions coming in. If you still haven't typed in your question yet, this is the only really opportunity to ask questions. So please do get typing. We've got 15 minutes, so we should be able to get through all of the questions. So the first question is, Bess, if you don't mind answering this one, came through, says, does the industrial site where the technology is going to be deployed have to be in the UK, or can it be overseas, be outside of the UK?
Thanks very much, Jenny, and thanks to everyone for all your questions. The industrial site needs to be in England, Wales or Northern Ireland. So within the UK, but not in Scotland. As Lily referred to earlier, there's a separate Scottish IETF that people can look at for sites in Scotland.
Lovely, thank you. And in fact, I'm also supporting the Scottish Government with their IETF, and that will be launching in the summer. So if you do have Scottish sites, get in touch for that. The second, well, quite a few questions actually related to the technology readiness level. So Lily, if I could give you this question. So first of all, we had regarding the phrase mature technology, what TRL does that relate to in order to qualify? And does that also relate to the feasibility studies? Do they have the same technology readiness levels? And then there was a third question which was sort of related. For the technology status, are you saying the technology is new to our industrial site, but not new to the market? Is that correct?
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, those are really good questions. So I briefly covered the technology readiness level in my presentation. So essentially the key test is that if you're looking for a deep decarbonisation project, so that's generally those fuel switching and carbon capture projects that are going to directly reduce the emissions that you're producing on your site, then that would at least have had to have achieved a technology readiness level of 7. Do talk to your sort of contractors that you might be working with or technology suppliers if you're not sure what the technology readiness level is of the project. The key thing that they need to be able to show is that it has been prototyped in the past in a relevant operational environment. So that's not necessarily your specific sector, but it is a sector that's carrying out industrial processes that can be aligned to your site without too much sort of further studying or research and development. In the energy efficiency strand of the competition, it's a minimum technology readiness level of 8. So that means that it's further along, that it has been tested and demonstrated and qualified in the relevant operational environment. In terms of whether it needs to be a new technology for your site specifically, so it might be the case that actually you've already deployed this technology somewhere else in your organization, but you're still struggling to make the business case work for redeploying that technology at your specific site. For example, your budgets are very heavily constrained, or perhaps you've maybe been able to make the financials of the project work elsewhere in another country, but you haven't been able to bring that technology to your site in the UK, then that can be a perfect opportunity for the IETF to help you to overcome some of those upfront costs to install in the competition or in the project, or indeed to do a study. So it doesn't have to be a completely new technology to your site or indeed to your sector, but we do expect it to have already proven that it's met those minimum technology readiness levels. I hope that sort of answers those questions, but again, if you've got any sort of further ones about that, we can talk to you about the specifics of your technology.
And just to be clear, the technology readiness levels you've just described, that's for the studies and for the deployment. It's the same technology readiness level. Lovely, great stuff. Okay, the next one, we'll go back to BEIS. Is this fund sector specific, or would it include marine, for instance?
So I'm afraid marine isn't within the scope of the fund. The thing you need to look at are the eligible SIT codes, the eligible industrial processes, which Lily ran through in her presentation. So those are, broadly speaking, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, recovery and recycling of materials, and data centres. So that's the key thing to look at when considering whether or not you feel that you would be eligible. But obviously, if you've got something very specific you'd like to talk to us about, we're always keen to understand what projects are out there, thinking also sort of about the future and different funding opportunities. So, please do get in touch.
Lovely, thank you, Beth. The next one, if we have an end-to-end hydrogen project, so generating hydrogen, storing hydrogen, using hydrogen on an industrial site, should we be applying into the IETF decarbonisation deployment competition, or is the Industrial Hydrogen Accelerator Fund a better fit? Lily, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I'm glad you've mentioned the Industrial Hydrogen Accelerator. That's another fund offered by BEIS, and it's actually open over a relatively similar period as the IETF. I'd say that if you're looking at a project that incorporates both hydrogen production and hydrogen use at an industrial site, then it's probably the IHA that would be a better fit for your project. That would be able to fund all elements of that project scope, whereas the IETF can only support the end use side, so all of the equipment and adaptations you need to install on the industrial site itself. The other key differences between the funds are that as the IETF supports those sort of slightly more mature technologies, the IHA is generally able to support technology solutions that are perhaps less tried and tested. So there's lower TRL thresholds for that fund as well.
Great stuff, thank you. Next up, we have a question about the technology that can be deployed. So they're asking, could you confirm that the fund is not just for the deployment of energy technology? Lily, do you want to do that one too?
Yeah, happy to. So this might be one where it'd be helpful if we found out a little bit more about your specific proposal, so you can come and talk to us afterwards. Generally, we are looking at energy technologies, but there are those wider technologies that I mentioned, such as process optimization. So perhaps areas where you can become more resource efficient, reduce the waste in your process, perhaps by changing the feedstocks in your process, and in doing so, save you energy. There's also technologies like carbon capture that we'd be able to fund as well. And again, that can be carbon capture and utilisation or carbon capture and storage.
Lovely, thank you very much, Lily. And the next one, I'll probably come back to you, sorry, Lily. What other funds are available for, because renewable generation like solar and wind is out of scope for this, are there other funds that are available that might be able to help with the development of those technologies?
Yeah, there certainly are incentives available for those technologies. So at the moment, one that I'd steer you towards would be the super deduction scheme. That's a programme that's offered out until the end of March 2023 and can support you in receiving some tax rebates against the costs of installing equipment like renewable technologies. There are a few other incentives of that kind as well, which we can point you towards or you'll be able to find online. For other technologies like CHP, there are incentives that exist through the CHP Quality Assurance Scheme as well.
Lovely. And the next two are related to geothermal and how we could use geothermal through IETF. So the first question is the use of geothermal to generate electricity on an industrial site eligible? And then the second question is, what other funding is available for electricity generation through geothermal or solar PV on an industrial site? So I guess they're kind of answering the first question themselves, but over to you, Lily.
Yeah, so I'd refer back to those other schemes that I just mentioned in terms of some of the other support that's available for electricity generation technologies. Geothermal projects can be in scope for the fund in as much as we can support heat pump type technologies. So that's sort of using the resources that you have available to you, whether that be waste heat, waste energy, or indeed environmental heat on your site. You are able to invest in those technologies using the IETF. It might be worth coming and having a chat to us about the specific scope of your project, but providing you're using that heat in an industrial process rather than, for example, more general heat to warm up your buildings or in a heat network, then that should be in scope for the fund. Great
stuff. And BEIS' fuel switching fund is coming back later in the year, I think, so that might be another route as well. The next question, you mentioned that the production of fuels is not in scope for the IETF. Does that include biofuels, or are you just talking about the production of fossil fuels?
It would include biofuels as well. So whilst we can support the costs of adapting your equipment to use lower carbon fuels, so for example, if you've got an existing source of biofuel on your site and you want to switch over your equipment to use that biofuel, then we can cover the costs of doing that. What we can't do is cover the costs of the actual biofuel production itself.
Okay, lovely, thank you. The next question is about a particular project idea. So would swapping gas boilers with heat pumps be eligible for the fund as a fuel switch, I guess?
Yeah, that would definitely be eligible. So if what you're able to do through the installation of that heat pump is effectively switch yourself away from the fossil fuel, so away from gas, to using what would effectively be electricity in a much lower carbon way of heating and your process, then that would class under the deep decarbonisation scheme as a fuel switching project.
Lovely, thank you very much. And now to give you a little rest, Lily, I think I can answer the next question. So the question is, how can we present our phase change products to this audience for their consideration as a solution, as a technology solution to be deployed on a site? I will be presenting shortly on some of the support services that are available when you're bidding into the IETF. And one of those is an online platform where technology providers like yourself can make a 5-minute video about your technology. It goes up on that platform, and then eligible lead applicants, the industrial sites, will be able to browse through those videos and connect with you and contact you if they're interested in deploying that on their site. So I would say that's probably the best way of raising your profile and letting people know about your technology. The next question, let's see, now I've run out of my notes, I'm going to just scroll down. Right, okay. So can I apply if my site is in the UK, but my company is registered in the Netherlands, but the head office is in the UK? So the fact that they have an international branch as well, is that a problem?
I think on that one again, if you could come and perhaps have a talk with us just so that we can fully understand. The key thing generally is that you do have a registered presence in the UK and that we're able to track and trace, for example, your accounts and other things, so we can make sure that all of the due diligence that we need to carry out on your firm can be done. So perhaps in that specific case, if you can come and talk to us, we can make sure we provide you with a proper answer.
Thank you very much. And the next one is again about TRL, and I apologise for missing if you've said it before, but how is novelty judged in the deep decarbonisation projects when the TRL level is 7 or above?
So in most cases, the sort of context for this is really that chart that I showed you right at the beginning of my presentation, in as much as we know that some of these technologies exist out there, but they've not necessarily been deployed widely in industry. So in some cases, it might well be that you're the first mover in your sector or in your specific subsector to actually adopt these technologies. So if you can show evidence of that in your application, that will show that you're essentially deploying a technology that's relatively novel, either for your company or for your wider sector or subsector. So those sorts of things would be taken into consideration. We of course recognise that in some cases it might be that actually a really well established, very mature technology could be quite a novel way of doing things for your company. So if you can explain that and show us why it might be perhaps a riskier proposition for you, then you'll score higher in that score.
Lovely. And the next one is, during experimental runs in manufacturing, can the site owner claim the material costs and machine time costs? I'm not sure what they mean by experimental, with the IETF isn't being R&D, but do you want to take that one too, Lily?
Yeah, happy to. So in some cases that might be permissible. So for example, if you need to do some testing on your existing equipment so that you can fully understand what your baseline energy use is and therefore what the savings could be from installing a piece of equipment, and perhaps you need to install some submeters in order to do that, then we'd be able to fund those submeters for the period in which they're used. So the key here is that we can't necessarily cover the full costs of that new equipment, but what we can do is make sure that the usage time of that equipment is covered in the costs that we offer you.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Bess, I think this one probably for you. You mentioned that Lily mentioned that aggregating proposals, we would be able to combine different projects together in an application. Would we be able to combine both a study and the implementation of the same project, so a study and a deployment in a single application, or does aggregation refer to different projects entirely?
So as Lily said, there's quite a set of sort of quite detailed rules in section 2.3 of the guidance. Broadly speaking, you can't aggregate studies and deployment projects. You can't aggregate energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation projects, and you can't aggregate feasibility studies and feed studies. There are some good reasons for that. We're not just trying to be difficult. So I think the short answer is no, but I would encourage anyone to have a look at the guidance and check over. And of course, you know, we're always happy to talk to people about specific instances.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. And Bess, if you don't mind, the next one as well. Is it correct that funding from phase 2 won't be released until a prototype has been proven in the real world at an industrial site?
So I want to make sure I've kind of, hopefully I've understood the question properly. I mean, the way it will work is when you submit your application, you'll need to submit a project plan with very clear milestones as to how you're going to get from sort of A to B. And at the end of your project, if it's a deployment project, you will have needed to have what we call completed the project, which means that your technology will need to be either already operational or ready to operate. So in order to get through the assessment process, you'll need to prove to us you have a plan to do that. In terms of payments, once, should you be successful, we will then agree a more detailed project plan with you, and that will include the way in which the payment schedule will work. So generally speaking, payments are made quarterly on the basis of milestones and on the basis of the progress that you've made. So the money is released during your project, as long as you're actually doing the things that you said that you would do, and we are able to verify that. And obviously the last tranche of money won't be released until we can prove that you've completed the project to our satisfaction. Of course, if at any point in the project you don't end up completing the project, then there are clauses within the grant funding agreement that you'll sign, which would mean that we could claw back the money, but you will be paid as you go. But the detail of that again is in the guidance, and it's not that we wait until the very end to give you all the money.
Okay, but just to be clear, the IETF doesn't fund the demonstration of a prototype to show that it works. That has to have already been done, particularly for the energy efficiency where the TRL is 8. Yeah. So for energy efficiency, it does have to have already been proven in the real world setting. You can't do that with this funding.
No, in line with the TRL levels that we were discussing earlier. Yeah.
It's a permanent deployment. It's not an R&D project. Yeah. Next question, is using production wastewater and organic material to create bioenergy within scope? Lily, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that. So that sounds as though that would fall under generally our category that we'd say is production of fuels, and therefore that wouldn't be in scope for funding. I would just say that there are some exceptions where perhaps you might be using waste energy, waste fuels to produce electricity. That can be in scope for the competition. There's some quite detailed guidance around that you'd find in the annex to our guidance, so do have a look at that. But the specific example you've cited here of producing biofuels would be out of scope.
And just to add to that one, if what you're doing is a lower TRL as well, then the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator might be a better fit for that one, because the resource efficiency angle is part of the IETF as well as energy efficiency. So it's worth going and have a look at that one. Okay, let's just check if we've got any more further down. Here's another one. So in addition to new equipment and installation costs, would the decommissioning of the existing equipment also be covered by the fund? So taking out the old furnace to then put in the new one, is all of that part of the project cost?
Yeah, so I'll go back to a little bit of the explanation I gave when I was talking about eligible costs. So one thing that we really want to make sure is that you're not including any costs that you'd have incurred anyway. So for example, if you were coming up to the standard replacement of your boiler, or there are other environmental reasons why you had to decommission an existing piece of equipment on your site, then those costs couldn't be claimed for through the IETF. If, however, without the fund, you would have carried on using that boiler for a really long time, and that in order to install the new, more energy efficient or low carbon fuel boiler, you need to decommission that old boiler, and that's going to have a substantial cost, then you would be able to claim for the cost of doing that as part of the overall package of costs that you're seeking from the IETF.
That's great, thank you. The next one, Bess, if you'd like to take this one, is work on technologies being deployed at NHS hospitals or trusts to reduce their carbon emissions eligible? Would that a hospital be classed as industrial?
So unfortunately, the NHS isn't under the scope of the competition. Again, I'd point you back to the SIC codes and the eligible industrial processes, which are sort of quite specific. So one would need to look at those to make a decision. But broadly speaking, the NHS is not within the scope of this.
Thank you very much. Next one, would a project that has both energy efficiency and carbon reduction benefits be eligible for the deep decarbonisation strand rather than the energy efficiency strand? Which would be a better fit, I guess they're asking.
So that might depend on the specifics of your project. So if you'd like to come and talk to us afterwards, you'd be very welcome to, and we can have a meeting or a further discussion about your project. It can well be the case that a project falls under both the scope of the energy efficiency or the deep decarbonisation strands of the competition. Heat pumps can be one of those technologies where, for example, that's helping you both to reduce your energy consumption, but it's also perhaps helping you to switch away from an fossil fuel to electricity. In those cases, what we'd say is that there are slightly different tests that are applied in each strand of the competition. There's also different generosities on the grants that you can receive. So see which one is most applicable to you. And which one you can make the strongest case for your project for. So if the really strong benefit of what you're doing is that's going to help you to move to a low carbon fuel, it's more likely to fit in the deep decarbonisation strand of the competition. If the largest benefit of what you're doing is that you're going to reduce your existing fuel consumption, then that probably fits better with the energy efficiency strand.
Okay, thank you very much. The next one, would electrification of a forklift truck fleet that's used on site be eligible for the IETF?
So unfortunately, that's not eligible for the IETF, and that's because forklift trucks aren't included in our definition of eligible industrial processes. So because that's transport, that falls outside of scope of this competition. Thank
you very much. And will the low carbon energy efficient brick manufacturing be eligible? I guess they're saying if they change the materials, the way they make the bricks, would that be eligible if it's reducing energy?
Yes, there's probably a couple of caveats that I'd put on that, in as much as if what you're looking to do is set up a new site, so a new production process for creating a different type of brick, then that wouldn't be in scope for funding. What you need to be showing is that you are adapting an existing industrial site, and in doing so, you're going to make that existing site use less energy or become lower carbon. But indeed, it's the case that if you were able to change the way in which you're making those bricks, and in doing so, it's going to require less energy, and you can point towards the pieces of industrial equipment that you need to invest in order to achieve that energy saving, then those can be claimed through the IETF.
That's great. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time on our Q&A session. There was lots of questions there, so thank you all very much for popping those in the chat box for us. I hope that's helped to answer your queries. For the ones that we didn't get time to get to, then please do send an email into the IETF email that I mentioned earlier. Steph will pop that in the chat box on YouTube for you. Or sign up for a one-to-one with BEIS this afternoon if you want to talk through your project idea in a little bit more detail in confidence with them. We're able to do that for you. Right, so next, it is a bit of audience participation. So we, as I said, we have 9 companies that have signed up to do a 2-minute pitch. So they're going to share their services or skills that they might have that could help you with some of the deployments that we've discussed this morning. So if I'm still struggling with moving the slides on, so if you could help me out with slide, there we go, lovely, thank you very much. So this is our list of pitches that you'll be hearing from over the next half an hour. For the people pitching, thank you very much for giving us your time. I am very strict on this, you only get 2 minutes. So you will hear my phone start to beep if you run out of time. So if you could keep to 2 minutes, that would be great. When you want to move your slide on, just say next slide, and my colleague Olivia will move that on for you. But first up, if I could ask Helen Atkinson from Bechtel to do your pitch, that would be great. Are you there, Helen? I think you might be on mute. Oh, apparently Helen's not made it, so we'll skip over Helen. Sorry about that. So moving on to the next person in the list, we have Eleanor Ackers from Induction Food Systems.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Thanks, Eleanor. Do you want to kick off?
All right, thanks, Jenny. So as Jenny said, my name is Eleanor Akers. I'm from Innovative Energy Consultants, which is a consultancy supporting induction food systems. Induction Food Systems is a US-based technology provider that has developed a patented method of induction heating technology for process heating. Induction heating of process fluids allows industrial sites to switch from natural gas boilers and steam systems to clean, efficient electrical heating. So I first came across IFS when they came and pitched at a former company I worked for. And as soon as I heard about this technology, I thought, wow, that will mean I will never have to walk through a steam leak again. So I used to work on a process site. I'm very familiar with all the problems of steam systems breaking, of leaks. Added to that, the price of natural gas is rising and the grid is becoming cleaner and cleaner. So electrifying process heating to decarbonize is a great way forward for an industrial site to manage both their sustainability goals and to manage their site and maintain safe operations. So it's, as you can see from the slide, it's a middle out heating process. So there's a heating element that runs through a pipe. The pipe is wrapped in an induction coil, and this generates heat. And because it's very easy to switch on and off, it has very little rundown time, it's very controllable, it's very precise, product is not lost as you're waiting for it to heat up or cool down, fouling is reduced, and as I said before, there's no need for steam. So we are seeking an industrial partner who is interested in working with us to deploy the first industrial scale unit in the UK. We are deploying a test site in the UK at small scale. So if anyone is interested in studies, please reach out. And that's my 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
That was perfect, Eleanor. That is exactly how it's done. Thank you very much. We do have Helen with us now. Are we able to move the slides back to Helen's for Bechtel? A little bit further back? A couple more? There we go, lovely. Helen, are you there? Helen? I think you might be on mute still. Last chance. Okay, I'm sorry, Helen, we're going to have to press on. But if we can move on to now our next person is Ahmed Rez from Aston University. Ahmed, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Do you want to
Right,
start?
okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmed. I'm a lecturer from Aston University. I'm here today actually to offer my help actually to contribute with my R&D capacity in developing new solution for energy recovery, specifically heat recovery. So I've been engaged with many industries actually. So something like glass industry, steel industry, aluminum recycling industry, stainless steel electropolishing and steel galvanization industries. So they have a lot of waste heat and they want to reuse this heat actually in different ways. So Aston University has a good legacy actually in working within applied research environment. And below here are my contact details. So next slide, please. So what I can offer is, I think you skipped one, it's not mine. Yeah, right, okay. So what I can offer is three or mainly two things. Heat storage actually for later use using BCM technology, phase change material technology, or using thermochemical technology. The difference between BCM and thermochemical is different TRL level. So I can offer also my capacity in R&D in redesigning the reuse of heat or designing the reuse of heat actually in on site. So which, because essentially there is no one solution fits everyone. So it needs a lot of analysis and modeling capacity that what we can help with. So that's why we're doing a lot of modeling and calculation to get it into the right level. Who I can contribute with or collaborate with, company or stakeholders to recover the heat, and other people from different industries actually. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ahmed. And you will have seen a quick sneak preview of our next pitch, which is from Animesh Ghosh from Envira. Animesh, are you there? Seem to be having a little bit of problem with the mute button. No, Animesh, are you able to talk to us? No, it's all quiet. So we will move on to the next person. Hopefully we've got Howard Lowe on the line. Are you there, Howard? Okay. This is not going as well as expected. Howard, your last chance to do a pitch. No, okay, not to worry. Next on the list is Andrew Bardsley from BusinessWise. Are you there, Andrew? No. Okay. I know Rob is there because I can see him in the list. Rob, are you able to talk to us? Rob Wheatley from Amoresco. Just having a little bit of a technical problem, I think, because nobody is able to talk to us on Zoom. So you're having to listen to me waffling on. If you could just bear with us for one moment, see if we can fix the problem. Ah, okay. So the host of the Zoom, unfortunately, her broadband dropped off, and that might have caused the problems. So I guess, Rob Wheatley, can you talk to me now?
Yes, hopefully that's fixed the problem.
Yeah.
Yes, success.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Okay, if you'd like to start your pitch.
Lovely, thank you. Good morning, my name's Rob Wheatley and I'd like to introduce Amoresco to you. Wherever you are on your journey to net zero, Amoresco can help you. Our clients include one we assisted with a successful IETF application in phase 1. Amoresco have a comprehensive collection of energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions, and our clients have already saved millions of tons of CO2 whilst enjoying significant energy cost savings. Amoresco can help you do the same. Next slide, please. Amoresco can analyse your energy usage and identify for you potentially energy savings and decarbonisation measures from our comprehensive technology portfolio. We can design and implement those improvements and provide guarantees of the savings. We can provide ongoing operation and maintenance support. Amoresco can help you apply for funding and manage your compliance, and in the development of strategies of energy management and plan for achieving net zero. A project for us might be made up of multiple measures, such as heat pumps, motor upgrades, heat recovery and integration, process optimization, load management, solar thermal and power. And usually we can also provide you with options to finance the opportunities through our wide variety of funding models that enable you to choose whether to fund your infrastructure upgrades on or off balance sheet, and with budget neutral options where the projects are paid for by the savings. Commercial models range from traditional CapEx, power purchase agreements, energy as a service agreements, design, build, own, operate and maintain agreements, and performance contracting agreements. So wherever you are in your carbon journey to net zero, Ameresco can help you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. That was spot on, 2 minutes. Okay, so according to my list, we have 2 more people. So can I just check, do we have Kathy McVeigh on the line from Cool Sky? Are you there, Kathy? No? Okay, and our final pitch, unfortunately today with the technical problems, is Peter Sadlington from DHV, or Royal Haskell DHV.
Royal Haskell DHV, but that's okay. It's a long word. Hi everyone, my name is Pete. I'm the Business Development Manager for Royal Haskell DHV in the UK. We've got a number of offices throughout the country, and we're international design, engineering and environmental consultants. We're active across a number of sectors that you can see on the screen, and my contact details are there too. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn via the QR code or using the Meeting Mojo app, which looks really good. Next slide, please. So in terms of the services we can offer, they're shown on screen, but I've got a limited amount of time. So what I'll do is I'll just draw your attention to some of the experience that we have in this space to try and bring it to life a little bit. We've worked with companies like Amazon, improving the energy efficiency of their large distribution centers through robotics and automation. We've designed the building services and structural services required for those sites, as well as the overall design templates. So we're the worldwide design template holder for Amazon in the UK. We've worked with a number of food and beverage manufacturers, creating roadmaps to achieving net zero, which include the carbon accounting side of things, reviewing a number of technological and energy efficiency options, conducting feed and engineering studies, and then conducting the detailed design of those systems as well. So this involves both site improvements and production line improvements as well. And that's right across the spectrum. So we've worked in breweries, food producers, all sorts. And we've conducted energy efficiency studies at large industrial sites and ports as well. I recognise maritime's not included, but we are active as well in the hydrogen space, providing feed studies to international hydrogen projects for industrial manufacturers as well. We're looking to work with anyone applying for funding where our expertise and experience may be a benefit. I think that's just under 2 minutes, but thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Peter. Okay, we're going to try and go back because the technical problems weren't down to people pitching. So we're going to skip back to Business-Wise and Andrew Bardsley to do his pitch. So are you there, Andrew?
I am. Thank you very much. Apologies.
It's our fault. No need to apologise. Off you go.
So we are a energy management consultancy. We support businesses, small, medium, large enterprises that don't have dedicated engineering resource in-house to help tackle the sort of complex landscape of energy utilization, generation, efficiency within their sites. Normally, we see this sort of distributed between procurement and health and safety and all sorts of weird and wonderful parts of the business. But we offer essentially a one-stop service where we can help integrate within businesses. Next slide, please. So we do this through as a service model. Basically, we embed ourselves within a business. We can provide metering, monitoring hardware to set up baselines and support any feasibility or engineering studies that are proposed for schemes like the IETF, as well as having the engineering expertise in-house to then stress test the technical designs of suppliers and the likes. We work across pretty much any sector within the UK. and where businesses might have to invest heavily in technical services and personnel to bring the sort of expertise into a business that we already have at our fingertips. We can act very quickly on problems that businesses are facing. So things that we support, so identification of energy conservation measures, energy auditing, metering, monitoring, technical reviews and the like, project management, all sorts, end-to-end solution for any energy management problem you might have. Thank you.
Great, thank you ever so much. And apologies to the other people who were going to pitch today, and unfortunately with the technical problems haven't been able to get through. We'll make sure that your slides, obviously they're going to go, a link is going to be sent out to all the presentation slides. So people will see your slides and will see your contact details and hopefully get in touch with you even though you haven't had a chance to pitch. Okay, so the final presentation now is from myself. I'm just going to talk to you about some of the support services that are available to you if you're applying into one of the 3 IETF competitions. So next slide, please. So I'm going to cover help to understand the competition information itself. So the competition guidance that we've provided a link to earlier. I'll talk about how you can find help with actually filling in your application form and how to do that. I'll talk about help to find partners if you're looking for you're a technology provider or a delivery partner and you want to work with an industrial site, or if you're an industrial site who's looking for a technology provider who can come and deploy something on their site. We'll talk about that. And then finally, also how to identify relevant technologies that are eligible to deploy with support from the IETF fund. Next slide. So first of all, help to understand the competition information. Lily had this in her slides, but I've popped it on here again. This is a link to the summer 2022 competition guidance for all 3 of the competitions, so the studies and the 2 deployment competitions. Each round, if you're familiar with IETF and you've looked at the guidance before, I'd still recommend you go and have a look at the competition guidance, because each round it can change slightly. So it is worth having a read to make sure that what you're doing is in scope and that you are eligible to apply. Having read through all of that information, and there is a lot of information, it goes into more detail than we've been able to cover today. If you have any questions, then as Lily said, you can contact the IETF BEIS team at the email that I've provided there, particularly if you want to know if your project idea is in scope or if you're eligible to lead a project. Make sure you do write eligibility screening in the subject line, just to make sure that your email is processed quickly. So that they aim to try and get back to you within a couple of days, but putting that in the subject line makes sure that they can prioritize that for you. Next slide. In terms of help with the application process, we've got a couple of things. First of all, we have fortnightly webinars where you can come and join us and ask any questions about scope, eligibility, or application process. It is an open forum. It's just like the Q&A session that we've done today. So we won't be presenting any slides. You come along and have a chat with BEIS and myself in an open forum with other people who have questions. We find that works really well because you might find that someone else will ask a question that you hadn't thought of, but the answer can help you with your application. So the first competition clinic is taking place on the 28th of June, and then they'll carry on every fortnight until the window closes in September. And you can register for any of those 6 clinics at the link I've provided there. The second service that's available is a step-by-step video tutorial to help you with completing the online application. So as Lily said and Marcus said, the application is on BEIS's new application portal, and the videos will take you through not only how to get into the portal, and to register for the portal, but also each takes you through each question on the application form, explaining exactly what it is they're looking for, so that you can really submit a good quality application when you apply. So I've provided a link there. You can look through. That link takes you to the whole list of videos because they're in sections. You will also find them on the application portal. So as you work in your way through the application, if there's a particular section where you get stuck, there will be a video attached to that so that you can have a view of the video, and that might help you to move to answer whatever query that you have. Next slide. And help to find partners. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of the event, we have a dedicated IETF networking platform. It's called Meeting Mojo. And that we have lots of people on there, over 350 people on there now. They're all interested in the IETF. That's the only reason this platform exists. So you are kind of hopefully pushing at an open door if you want to look for partners on there. You register at the link I've provided there. As I said earlier, if you'll be asked questions as you register, and that will create a profile for you on the platform. But once you go in, once you get your login details and you go in, I would recommend that you go to your account and add even more detail to your profile, because that will help people to find you. You can search on whether somebody's a manufacturer or a technology provider. You can look for individuals, or you can look for organizations on there. And once you've found the person that you want to talk to, you can direct message them and set up a meeting. The platform's open for the whole of the IETF programme, so right up until March 2025. So that will allow you to carry on networking between the competition windows as well as during to find partners for future applications. And again, as I said earlier, if you want to have one of the one-to-one confidential meetings with BEIS or myself this afternoon, then this is the platform where those meetings are going to take place. So if you're not already on there, you haven't registered in previous competition windows, then please do register, book a time slot with myself or BEIS, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you this afternoon. Next slide. Now, help to find relevant technologies. The IETF is largely a technology neutral fund, as Lily said earlier on, but it can be a bit of a minefield. So for industrial site owners, we've set up this technology marketplace that hosts 5-minute videos from different technology providers. And these videos have been vetted by us to make sure that they are eligible for the IETF. So as an industrial site owner, a lead applicant in a project, you can go in there, browse through the videos, and be confident that if there's something that looks like it might work for you, it would be okay for the IETF. You can, as an industrial site owner, you can register for access to the marketplace at the first link that I've provided there. Like the networking platform, the marketplace is open for the whole time, even between competition windows, and it will stay open until the end of the IETF programme in March 2025. So you can browse those videos at your leisure and hopefully find something that might work on your site. As a technology provider, if you haven't already done a 5-minute video, but you want to raise your profile with potential customers and lead applicants for the IETF fund, then I would encourage you to do a video. The second link you can see there is where you register and upload your video. And it's going to be open all summer. So you've got all summer to be able to put your video on. Obviously, I'd recommend you do it sooner rather than later so that people are aware of you and can find you for bidding into this competition window. But it is there if you want to do it later in the summer. And we're not looking for anything glossy, you know, it doesn't have to be a sales video. This is just a way of making people aware of what you have to offer. So you can do this on your mobile phone. You could record yourself on Zoom or Teams talking about your technology. And that both of those things will export what you've saved, what you've recorded, as either an MOV or an MP4 format. And that's what we need. It has to be a video format. We can't accept PowerPoint slides, unfortunately. So technology providers, get creative, get those videos into us. And then lastly, on relevant technologies, we also, new for this window, we're doing a short podcast series. It's obviously going to help you to understand some of the technologies that have already been deployed with IETF funding, but it will also promote the wider benefits of the IETF. So we'll hear from BEIS and policymakers on why this fund is important to getting us to our net zero carbon goals. We'll also, as I say, hear from some of the industrial sites that have already been funded. So sites that have deployed technology or maybe done a study in preparation for a future deployment, they'll be talking about what they are doing and also why it's important to them, the benefit that they think it's going to bring to their site. And then finally, we'll hear from some delivery partners that are supporting projects. And they're going to talk about some of the technologies that you might want to consider for your site. Last slide. So the last thing I want to tell you about in terms of services that we have another a live event coming up on the 14th of July. This is going to be taking place in Birmingham, so it is an in-person event. We will record it, but it won't be live streamed. So it's better to come along and do a bit of networking in Birmingham with us. We're going to be doing it as a joint event with another fund that I mentioned earlier on, the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator. So they're going to be presenting some of their funded projects from past windows, and we'll be doing the same with the IETF. So it'd be a great way to find out what's going on, what technologies you could deploy, particularly around energy efficiency. And also, as I say, a great way to network and maybe find partners for future applications into both of those funds, which are open at the moment. The registration isn't quite open yet. Carbon Trust is just setting that up for us. But as soon as the link is available, hopefully this week, we'll be able to include it in the email that we send out with all the information about the IETF. So that's just, that's wrapping up the services that are available to support you with your application into the IETF. I just wanted to do one final slide to tell you a bit about the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator, because it is relevant to the audience here. It's a nice complementary fund to the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. So the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator is part of BEIS's Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. This is a £1 billion fund that's going to be over the next 4 years funding innovation. So it is R&D. IETF is capital investment. This one is R&D. So if you've maybe as an industrial site, you've looked for something to deploy on your site and there's nothing that's quite fits your particular industrial process, then maybe this one is the one for you, where you can work with a technology provider to actually develop something that fits and solves your problem on your site. So the IEA supports the demonstration of novel industrial process technologies with the potential to cut carbon emissions through either reducing energy consumption or, slightly different to the IETF, it also includes improving resource efficiency. The technologies that are being demonstrated with the funding that's provided have to be at the start of the project, at least at TRL 5. But that's a prototype that's been trialed maybe in a lab environment. So it is a much lower TRL than the IETF. And after the demonstration has taken place, it will move up to a TRL 8. These demonstration projects have to take place at industrial site in the UK, but it is the whole of the UK this time, so it includes Scotland. And the projects need to include an industrial partner who owns the site where the demonstration will take place, and the technology developer that is developing their new technologies. You can have lots of other partners involved, as I've listed there, because it is an innovation project. So this fund is being managed on behalf of BEIS. Carbon Trust, rather, is managing this fund on behalf of BEIS, and myself and Jacobs are supporting Carbon Trust as well. So if you do have any questions about this fund, please get in touch with myself, and obviously do come and join us on the 14th of July for that live event in Birmingham, so that you can talk to the IEA team in person. So that's it now for our event today. I want to thank you all very much for joining us for the webinar this morning. I hope it has been useful and informative, and it has encouraged you to apply to the fund. As Lily and Marcus said, we're expecting the last round of funding in the autumn to be extremely popular. So if you can apply into this summer window, it will increase your chances of being successfully funded. I just want to apologise again as well for the technical problems we had during the pitches. As I said, all of the slides and presentations that you've seen today will be circulated to everybody that registered for the event, along with a link to the recording and also a link to the competition guidance, so that you can get straight on and start looking at your application forms now. But other than that, I wish you the best of luck bidding into the IETF, and thank you all very much. Goodbye.